In this video, I'm going to walk you through the installation and my review of a Hykoont solar-powered street light. This particular light is spec'd at 500 watts and 25,000 lumens. Now, I have no way to verify those numbers, so I have to take their word for it that those are its operating parameters. What I'm showing in the picture is the box that it came in and everything that was in that box. If I start up in the top, I've got the solar panel and the light, and I've got those two connected right now because I'm charging the battery before I go through with the install. And if I walk up a little closer and take a look at the light, it turns out on the bottom of the light there is a little indicator that tells you the current battery level. I'm not sure how well you can see this in the video, but there are 5 lights. Each light indicates 20% level of the battery. So from left to right, it's 20%, 40%, 60%, and so forth. And as you can see right now, it's the light in the middle that is blinking, which I interpret as saying that the battery currently is somewhere between 40 and 60% of capacity. And the fact that the light is blinking tells me that it is currently charging. Okay, so if I back out of there and get back over here, what I have lying on the ground in front of the panel and the light are the various things that came in the package. On the left is the mast that I'll be mounting both the solar panel and the light onto. We'll see more details on that as we go through. Then next, that big bracket lying in the back is part of the pair that are used to connect the light to a pole, if that's how you choose to mount it. Those two smaller brackets, kind of C-shaped, are the brackets that are used for mounting to the solar panel and then mounting the solar panel to the mast or mounting arm. This little H-shaped thing here in the center, that is what mounts onto the back of the solar panel, so that I can then attach it to the clamp and then attach it to the mast. And then down here in the center is a lot of the hardware. Now, it turns out I'm not sure if my package had previously been sent to someone else or something happened in shipping or in packing, but anyway, all the hardware that came for installation was loose. So I've just had to search through the box and find all the various pieces. It turns out that the user manual doesn't give you a detailed inventory of the number of parts. So I don't really know whether I have everything I need to do the install. I'll be finding that out as I go. But there's a bunch of hardware there, so between that and my own stash, I should be able to find everything I need to get this light mounted. And then over here, a little further on the right, is the remote control for the light, as well as you can see, they provide batteries for powering the remote control. And then finally, there is one tool that came in the package. It's an Allen wrench that I'll be able to use to mount the light to the mast. Then finally, one word about the packing is it came securely packed in a styrofoam box. The only issue I had is that this is pretty low quality styrofoam, so I'd advise you to open up this box somewhere where you don't mind there being a lot of little pieces of styrofoam floating around, because stuff flies everywhere when you start pulling things out of the box. Okay, so that's the review of what came in the box. And as I say, as we go through here, what I'm going to do is show you the various steps into getting this thing mounted on a pole in front of my house. Okay, now naturally I wanted to do as much of the assembly of this light on the ground as possible. So what I've been doing for the last little while is I've put the H-shaped bracket on the back of the solar panel. And I've also, I can step to the side, you can probably see it better, I've also attached to that H-shaped bracket the U or C-shaped bracket that is going to let me attach that to a matching piece on the mast. Which, by the way, over here on the right, I have mounted the U or C-shaped bracket onto the mast, so it's ready to go. I don't want to really do any more assembly than this on the ground, because I think if I had the solar panel and the light already on the mast, either one of them, that it's going to get in the way when I try and mount the mast using these brackets onto the pole. So I'm going to call this everything I'm going to do on the ground, and the next step is going to be to put the mast on the pole and then start putting all these pieces together. And what I've done over here is I've just put aside everything I need, I think, to do all the work once I'm up in the air. I want to not have to make any more trips than necessary up and down from the mounting point. So I've put the handful of tools and the hardware I'm going to need to do my mounting down here aside, and I'll take that up with me when I go up to mount the light. Okay, so the next step is going to be to mount the light on this pole that I've planted here in front of my house. And actually, let me go to a brief aside. Putting this pole in place was actually the biggest part of this job. One obvious huge advantage of solar is I can install the light anywhere I want without worrying about access to electricity. And it turns out that this spot here on this side of my house will allow the light to do a good job of lighting up the area right in front of my house entrance and in front of my garage. In order to do this, turns out I have a small stash of 20-foot joints of 3-inch steel pipe. And so I pulled out one of those pipes and I painted it John Deere green, and I sunk it into the ground here. With my post hole digger, about as deep as I could get without having to dig a hole to get into the hole, was 42 inches. So that 20-foot post is sunk 42 inches into the ground and then cemented around the bottom. Seems to be plenty sturdy. As you can see, my plan is to use my John Deere tractor with a pallet on my forks to use as a platform to work to mount the light. That's probably not an approved process by John Deere, but I certainly wouldn't work underneath hydraulics that are held up by the tractor like that, but working on top of the hydraulics I'm somewhat more comfortable with. But anyway, the next step is going to be to mount the mast onto the pole, and I'll stop and take a picture once the mast is on. So my mast is now installed. I've oriented it a little bit toward my house rather than straight out so that the light will fall where I want it to. This was a pretty straightforward job. It basically just involved using that bracket and bolting the bracket onto the pole. It would have been useful to have had a third hand in the beginning of the process to get everything held in place while you lined up the first bolt or two. I'll also comment that one of the hazards of working in the air like this is when you drop something like a nut, which I did twice. It takes a little bit longer to recover because you got to climb down the ladder and look around in the grass to find the missing nut. But fortunately, I was lucky enough to find everything I dropped, and I now have the mast in place, and I'm gonna now mount the solar panel, and I'll pick up the video again once the solar panel is in place. I just ran into one of those Murphy's Law snags that I'll share with you so that hopefully you won't have the same problem if you install one of these solar panels. Basically, my problem is that by locating the solar panel where I did on the pipe, or where the mast where I did on the pipe, it turns out that the top of the pipe is interfering with the positioning of the solar panel. So basically what I have to do is loosen the bolts on the mounting pipe and slide the whole assembly up probably halfway to the top in order to give enough clearance for me to point the solar panel in the direction I want to point it. Obviously, if it was pointed where I want it to be right now, I'd be done. But I want to point it a little more south than that, and I need to get a little more space to do that. So again, think ahead when you're mounting this thing about where the solar panel is going to be relative to the top of the pipe. So I have loosened the nuts on the attachment on the whatever we call that bracket, and slid the mast up about halfway to the top. I could have gone a little higher, but I decided, since I got a decent angle towards the south where I'm at now, that by putting it in the position it's in, I can actually let the mast lean slightly against the top of the pipe, giving it a little bit more support. So the solar panel hopefully will do well with that position. So now I'm down to the final step, which is putting the light onto the end of the mast. And just to make that job hopefully a little bit easier once I get up top, what I've done here on the ground before I climb up that ladder and start putting things together is basically the light has got that, for lack of a better word, socket there, and that's just going to slide onto the end of the mast arm. So what I have done is there's several bolts here that will tighten with an Allen wrench, and I have backed all those out to the point where I'm pretty confident that I'll be able to slide that onto the arm without doing any loosening of my bolts. And once I get it in place and get the line connected to the line coming out of the solar panel, all I should have to do up there is tighten those bolts, and I'll be good to go. Okay, the light is up, and that part went pretty much as planned. The only thing I had to fumble with a little bit was fishing the cord from the light through the hole in the mast so that I could connect it to the solar panel. So that took me a few tries to get that, but once I got that in place, having backed out those bolts that attached the light to the mast worked really well. So all I had to do was tighten them down, and the light is on. So the next question is going to be, what's this look like in the dark? And I'll try to remember to take a picture of that this evening. In case anybody's curious, my total time here, I'm not very quick. My total time for the install was a little over 2.5 hours. That includes getting out the tractor and getting it down here and putting it in place. And I have no idea how many times up and down the ladder I went to get parts, tools, and to pick up things I dropped. So that's the light install. A couple of final things I want to point out about the light before I finish this video. And one is if you look up on the light itself, and I hope this is going to show up in this lighting, but there on the bottom of the light is a set of 5 status lights. They basically are indicating the state of your battery charge. The lights go from left to right, and the first light, if only the first light is on, that means your battery charge is between 0 and 20%. 2 lights on means up to 40%, 3 lights 60%, and so forth. Since these batteries don't seem to like to go near zero, I'm certainly no lithium battery expert, but these batteries don't like to go to very low levels. So my plan is, if I ever find this status symbol down to a single light, I'm going to turn off the light for a couple of days until the batteries get a chance to recharge a bit. Right now, as you can see, I'm all the way up to full charge, 100%, so I'm good to go for a while. But that's something to keep an eye on, especially if you have several consecutive cloudy days. The final thing I wanted to say a couple of words about is the remote control. As you can see at the top, I have on and off buttons, pretty self-explanatory. Then underneath the center buttons, which look like an old mouse control, you have buttons with different numbers on them. On the left and the top is 8 hours, and to the right of that is 10 hours, and then there are 3+7 and 3+5 and so forth. What's going on there with those buttons is once the light is turned on, you press that button and the light will operate for those number of hours. For example, on the 8-hour button, the light will come on at full power for 8 hours and then shut off. The 3 plus or the plus situations, what's happening there is that when the light comes on, it comes on for the first number of hours at full power and then remains on but at lower power for the second number of hours. So the 3 plus 5 is 3 hours at full power and then 5 hours at reduced power. The actual button I'm planning to use, although I don't know for sure yet that this is how it works, but I'm pretty sure this is what's going to happen, is that center button is labeled as the, I think they call it the radio control, but basically what I think is going on with this button is that when I press that button, it will put the light in a motion detection mode. So when there's no motion, the light, when it detects darkness, so at dusk, with no motion, it'll come on at 30% power. However, during that time, while it's at the reduced power, if it detects motion, it will jump up to full power. And it'll stay at full power as long as it continues to detect motion. Once the motion has been gone for a little while, then the light drops back down to the lower intensity. And actually, just to avoid running my battery down too quickly, that's the mode I intend to use. I don't really need a bright light if there's nobody near the light. So I think that mode, the dusk to dawn operation with low intensity, with no motion, and high intensity when motion is detected, is the approach that I'm going to take for using the light. Okay, I think that is it for my discussion of the light. I'll have a few final comments when I take some pictures later of the light at low and high intensity. Okay, so the light is fully installed. The sun has gone down, it's dark out, and I was right earlier in the video about the radar mode on the remote control, because the light right now is at 30% brightness, roughly 30%. You can see what it's doing at this point. And what I'm going to do now is walk out within its motion detection range, which seems to be about 30 feet or so. I'm going to go out and trigger it so that it goes up to its higher brightness. Obviously it took me a little bit to get it to detect me, but as you can see, the lighting goes up significantly. As long as I'm moving out here, it'll stay at this higher level of intensity. And it lights things up very nicely. So if you don't really care about the brightness of the light, except when there's activity, I would highly recommend using the radar mode, that button in the center, rather than any of the 3 plus modes or the 8 or 10 modes, simply because there's really no advantage to having the higher light intensity, and it's going to eat up your battery a lot more quickly. So that's my story on the solar power light.